Welcome to the Burnt or Buttered podcast, quick movie reviews. I'm Toast, your host.
And I'm Stetson, and sometimes these quick movie reviews aren't so quick.
That is true. Sometimes they take about half the time of the movie.
This one that we're going to review is one that has won a lot of awards.
There is a lot of acclaim. When I looked on Letterboxd at what my friends were saying about this movie, all of them had it at 5 stars. One of them literally said, "This was everything." So, you know it's going to be good.
And I just got my Letterboxd, and so I have 2 followers, I think.
Number 1 subscriber.
I didn't think anything about this movie for a long time. Like, I saw the trailer and I thought, I don't really want to see it. And then it got all these awards, and I was like, maybe we have to see it.
Yeah. When I watched the trailer, I kind of thought that this was just gonna be another J-Lo Hustlers movie that came out a few years back, which I didn't really enjoy. It was okay, but in the trailer there was nothing that drew me to this movie. And the movie that we're talking about is Anora.
Or Annie, I guess. Anora, Annie, whatever she wants to go by.
Call me Annie.
Or, Sparkle. I don't know. I think she's the first stripper ever that has gone by her actual name at the club.
That was strange. I don't know what she was thinking on that. No survival instincts.
I guess her real name is Anora, but, Annie is kind of short for Anora.
But she did introduce herself as, "I'm Anora, you can call me Annie."
It's true.
So
I don't think it's very smart, if I'm being honest, but...
Hey, who are we to judge?
Exactly. This movie is updated 2025 version of, or 2024 version of Pretty Woman. Pretty Woman
meets Uncut Gems.
I like that. Yeah, shot a lot like Uncut Gems, I guess.
The whole vibe of it, felt very reminiscent of Uncut Gems, which, if I'm remembering correctly, Adam Sandler said, "If I don't win the Oscar for Best Actor, I will make the worst movie that you've ever seen." And he fulfilled that by giving us Hubie Halloween.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the trailer to this one, what this story is about a sex worker, stripper, who gets paid to be a girlfriend of a wealthy guy that is really young, wealthy guy. Young, wealthy Russian guy. And then they end up falling in love, and the story goes through their journey of falling in love / falling out of love, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah. It's an interesting film. The trailer really only covers about the first 30 minutes of the movie, it seems like. There's not a whole lot of storyline in the trailer, which is what I'm always hoping for in a trailer, but this one didn't give me enough to actually get interested in the movie, I think.
Yeah, this movie basically just explains that this kid is hiring this girl to be his girlfriend for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it.
Yeah. Well, let's get into Behind the Butter.
Let's do it.
So, going off of that Pretty Woman vibe, they actually did a full-on callback to Pretty Woman. I didn't realize this, but I was talking to a friend about the movie, and she mentioned the line where they're negotiating over how much money she's going to get for this. Mm-hmm. He says, "Will you be my girlfriend for a week? I'll pay you $10,000. And she says, "Make it 15." And they have a deal. What does he say? He says,
she says, "I would have done it for 12 or something."
And he says, "I would have paid 30." And that's actually a direct line from Pretty Woman.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They have that entire negotiation. And then he says, I would have paid some larger number. She says, I would have done it for a lower number, you know? So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, if you really love nudity in movies without watching porn, then you're going to love Anora.
I will say, yeah, the first 30 minutes mostly covers the strip club and her life working at the strip club. There's a lot of little vignettes of her working or dancing on particular types of guys who go to strip clubs. Like one that I thought was particularly interesting was she's dancing on this guy and he says, does your family know that you do this? You know, thinking, oh, I got her now. And she says, yeah. Does your family know you're here? And he says, oh, thank the Lord, no, or something like that, you know?
Yeah, it was an interesting look into that world. I do think it was probably the deepest dive into the reality of what working inside of a strip club probably would actually feel like. You know, not ever having worked inside a strip club, I don't know, but it seemed like it felt more real than any other type of movie, like the J-Lo movie or whatnot, where it was just raw and real, and you get to see the mentality of not only like the girls that are in the club, but also everyone else that's involved inside of it, whether it would be the owner, to the manager, to the DJ, to the clients that are coming in to participate. It was interesting to see how all of them kind of needed each other in one way, shape, or form. And watching, you can tell from the very beginning that she just has a very transactional thought process around men, just in general. And you'll see that slowly start to like change, like with the idea of her falling in love with Yvonne or whatever his name is, that she starts
Vanya.
to like have
Vanya.
She starts to have like an idea of like, oh, I'm actually falling in love. Oh, I'm actually going to win. I'm actually going to like have this storybook, you know, ending of this life that I've been struggling with.
Yeah. And I kind of got that, but I more got the idea that she started living in a fantasy world. Like he was always living in this fantasy world because he was on drugs, he was drinking. We didn't see him sober until the very end of the movie, pretty much, when he was forced to be sober. And even then he was hungover, he was delirious, you know? We only really see one sober moment from him. But in him living this fantasy world, Anora also gets swept in because she's also doing all the drugs. That's part of like a tip that he gives her is letting her take a rip, you know? And so then she, like that first 30 minutes, once they meet, it just feels like a fever dream because they're just living in this fantasy world of, this is so much fun. We're never like, he's got so much money. I'm never going to have to worry about anything else as long as I keep him happy.
And I agree, but I also like thinking that first 30 minutes, you get to see her slowly come to the realization that she hit the jackpot. You know, that like somehow she's the perfect person for this young kid. And he actually like loves her and wants to be with her, and they're going to have this great, wonderful life together.
Yeah. Cause it was so fun.
Well, I think that she actually grew to have feelings for him outside of like the transactional relationship that they had. Cause I think that she wanted the life, yes, but I do think that she wanted the life with Vanya. Like, I think that she would have had been okay having a lot less, but still being with him. Because I think that she felt like he actually cared for her more than just being a sex worker.
Which, to your credit, he did say that to her at one point. He said, "I think you would like me even if I had nothing," you know, and I think she agrees with that.
I think she slowly decided to. I think that at the very beginning of the movie, the first 30, 40 minutes or so, she would have never, ever thought that that was a possibility with any guy, ever.
Yeah.
And because of the way that she was treating her, and then because of the way that she was experiencing life in such a different way, she allowed herself to have her walls kind of come down for a little bit to accept the idea of like actual love.
Yeah.
You know, like when she was leaving the club and going and telling like all the other strippers that, you know, that she was
I'm getting married.
Like I'm out of here, like good luck, suckers, you know, type idea. I do think that she was legitimately in love, and that she like legitimately wanted that life with him. Even though like there's no other guy that could have brought that out of her, because she has this standard that she's built into her mind that I have to have X and X, Y, and Z to then, you know, for it to be worth my time. You know, if they don't have this, that, and the other, they're not worth being around me, because I know that people will pay for me, you know, to be around them, and they have X, Y, and Z.
And she, at this point, she's self-sufficient, you know, so she really doesn't need, unless you can provide her with something better than what she's got, she doesn't want it.
Yeah, and I think that, but at the same time, she's living in a dumpy apartment, you know, in the Bronx. Like she doesn't have anything crazy special with what she's making.
There's nothing that she can't leave behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and, you know, as the bodyguard comes around, what's his name? Like Igor comes around. She has to, I think she comes to the realization that her and him are not different. They are the same person. They live in the same area. They drive the same shitty cars. They are very, very similar, even though she puts herself and values herself way higher because she's paid to be around people for a certain period of time because of, you know, her body, in a way.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to a good point. So this whole film only took 37 days to film. And the scene where Igor is mostly introduced, they took 8 days to film that, which is pretty crazy. It's all shot pretty much in one room, and it took 8 days to film that. We were talking a little bit before the podcast about that scene and how interesting and integral it was to both of their characters, you know. From Anora's point of view, these guys just barged into her house, you know. She's married to Vanya now, so this is her house. They just barged in. Vanya ran off because he's scared of them. And then Igor tackles her, you know. He's keeping her from leaving. And she starts throwing things at him as a normal person would. And eventually he restrains her by holding on to her, you know, and then ties her up and stuff. But the other two guys are outside. They're not seeing this happen. So one of them comes back in, sees her tied up, and he's like, "What are you doing?" Like, initially, every person who walks in knows that this is wrong, right? But they switch as soon as Anora starts attacking them, you know? She's feisty.
Yeah, she definitely wasn't going to go down without a fight. Igor's character, I think, was the only redeeming aspect of this entire movie. You know, like,
whoa.
That's what I think. I mean, I feel like the rest of it was pretty basic and there wasn't very much into it. But Igor, he is living in a world where, just like her, everything in his life is telling him what he's supposed to be. You know, like, you have these relationships, you have these people, like, you have these bosses, and that means that you have to be X, Y, and Z. And with her, you know, because she's an attractive person, because she, like, you know, found out that, like, she can kind of use her body for, you know, to make a living. She's put herself into this box of what she's allowed to be and what she's allowed to achieve. Just like, Vanya's parents, like they were never going to accept her because of like the decisions and things that she's made in her life leading up to that point. Like they can't allow like that to be part of their world, just because of her past. Where Igor, like, is just kind of luck of the draw, and so he might not want to be the muscle, for these guys. He might not want to just do whatever they say. He wants a different life. He wants to have more. He wants to like be his own person, but he can't, like he's stuck. In the same way that I feel like she's stuck. Like, where does she go from being a sex worker? How do you backtrack from that? How do you get out of it? Like, where is the angle? Like, is the fairy tale, life possible now, at this point?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point. I will say, I think that all of the characters and all of the actors did a really authentic job. Like, I didn't doubt any of their characters the whole movie. Anora, Mikey Madison, who played Anora, I felt like did a very, very compelling job. And even Vanya, like,
Vanya was really good.
Yeah.
Like, he was very, very believable. And I was thinking about that too, that as he acted as this young, naive, pompous, like, kid, that then had some redeeming qualities to him. Like, he still was like a nice person, like they go
until his one sober moment,
kind of like, well, they go to Las Vegas and he could act like, the manager comes down like, hey, your room isn't ready yet, I'm sorry, and he like flips out on him, acting like he's all great, and he's like, hey dude, it's fine, like we'll just wait.
That was a funny moment,
and so like I think that showed where he really did I feel like he wanted to be a good guy, but probably deep down he's not a good guy. Yeah
because now that I've talked about his sober moment a couple of times, I'll just tell what the sober moment was. So they got married in Vegas, and his parents fly into the U.S. because they're pissed that he married a stripper. They look at it as a disgrace to the family. And these three guys who have been with him the whole time, they're literally scared for their lives from his dad and their family's lives. They think that since this happened on their watch, they're going to die.
I don't know if they think they're going to die, more so that they're going to lose their jobs, which means that their family is going to suffer.
Toro said several times, like, you've killed my family, to Anora and Vanya. So I think the stakes were pretty high for him.
Yeah.
But anyways, they all get there, and then they realize they can't have the annulment where they're at. They have to go to Vegas to have it annulled because that's where they got married. So they fly to Vegas, or they're getting on the plane to Vegas, and Anora is talking to Vanya, and she says, so are we seriously just going to give in to them and get a divorce? And he's still pretty hazy, but he snaps out of it right then, and he goes, are you serious? Of course we're getting a divorce. This is not real, And then he says, we've got to get on the plane, and we've got to get a divorce. And so then...
Well, and I think he said, like, what do you expect?
Yeah.
He just like, he's like, yeah, of course we are. Like, what do you expect? And to me, in that moment, when I saw that, I didn't see him as necessarily like a bad guy. I just saw him as, yeah, this is just reality. Like, he was just stating the facts of just...
But I think that was the first time that he has felt reality the whole movie, because literally he was running away from reality half of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the whole purpose why he was in the United States, was to kind of get away from the family, get away from like his responsibilities as this kid of this guy.
Yeah.
But I think like the last 15 minutes of the movie when Igor's dropping her off and he shows, well, even the conversation the night before where Igor and her are talking in, she's like, if the other guys weren't there, you definitely would have raped me. And he's like, no, I wouldn't have. She's like, why? He's like, because I'm not a rapist. And she's like, whatever, and
You have rapist eyes.
Yeah, you have rapist eyes. Doesn't believe her, but that shows so much more of who Anora is, and like, I mean, it shows like Igor, but it shows like who Anora is in the way that she just assumes every single guy is only for sex. Like that's the only thing they're after from any woman that's there, and like if they have the chance, they're going to take sex no matter what.
See, and that's interesting. I got something totally different out of that scene, because then they talk about him assaulting her, and he laughs and he doesn't even think it was assault. But like I was talking about earlier, every person who came into that room afterwards immediately knew this is wrong. Even though our lives are in danger, you should not be holding her like that.
Yeah, well, and I look at that as he was protecting himself in that moment, and so it's not assault because he was already assaulted. It's just self-defense of like he's just trying to stop her from hurting him.
See, but from her point of view, they broke into her house. Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah, where she thinks that like these guys are here to hurt her. Yeah,
and they did. It's like self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they hurt her. They tied her up. They didn't. There wasn't like any.
I mean, that's pretty traumatizing to have somebody break into your house and tie you up.
I mean, what would be traumatizing
whether
is if
it's
he knocked
physical
her out,
pain or emotional trauma for the rest of your life, where now you can't trust anybody who comes near you.
Sure.
So
I could see it from that way. The way I saw that is that Igor had crazy self-restraint in those moments, because like if someone's punching you, attacking you, and doing stuff, like the easy thing for him to do is to hit her back, is to hurt her.
He was trying to do whatever he could to make sure neither of them got hurt.
Yeah. He was doing everything he could not to hurt her while fulfilling like his need from his bosses to hold her there.
Yeah.
Like his goal was just to not have her leave. He's like, just stop moving. Stop trying to leave. like he just had needed her not to run away.
Yeah.
And so he did everything he could to stop her from running away, which then led to, he's like, hey, I'm going to tie you up if you don't stop.
Yeah.
And then ends up tying her up to like protect himself.
So another thing that I thought was interesting about that was, both of them thought that they were doing what was right in that moment for them. And it's that whole idea that every hero is a villain in somebody else's story, right? So like they both thought they were doing what was right, but the other person thought they were wrong,
Yeah. And I think like going back to, the final moments of this film where you see Anora come on to Igor at the end and have sex with him in that moment, but then regret it and slap him. But she, like we had talked about after the movie, that she felt like the only way that she can show that she's grateful is by using her body to like show that gratefulness.
Right.
And that was interesting and sad and hard to like watch, all at the same time.
Yeah, that was a very confusing, awkward, the whole thing just felt so weird to me. And then it clicked that was how she found her value the whole movie, or what she thought was her value to
the most
everybody
valuable
else.
thing that she could give. Yeah, and like I truly believe like after the Vanya thing, like it reverted her back to the idea that no guy could ever want her unless it's for some sort of exchange.
Quid pro quo, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Igor like legitimately just liked her.
Yeah.
And just wanted her to be happy. He felt very sorry for her, for going through this whole thing and him watching it the whole time.
and he was even happy and kind of chuckling to himself when she went off on Vanya and his parents. And then the dad just bust in a gut, because that's the first time that he's probably seen his wife get berated in that way.
Yeah, there were some good moments from this film for sure. And I get the message. I do get the message, but I don't know just how it was.
Final pop.
Let's go into that final pop. What do you think about this one?
So that first half an hour, I was kind of annoyed, and I started asking myself, am I just old? Because once they got married, I was like, these damn kids are so loud. And so for the first half an hour, I was kind of annoyed. And then as soon as those Toro and Igor and the other guy, as soon as they showed up, it kind of became like a Three Stooges thing. Like, it was funny and really intriguing, and I felt like all of the characters just came alive in that moment, and you started to really get into who they are and their motivations and things like that. Toro leaving the baptism, mid-baptism, when he's the godfather.
Or him, like, freaking out on the kids in the diner type idea.
Yeah. Like, that stuff was so interesting to me. And it felt, the ending was so uncomfortable. It felt so much like the ending of Uncut Gems, where you're just left in this silent theater thinking to yourself, does life suck? But so for me, it was a really, really interesting film, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. So I'm going to give it a 3.5.
3.5. I like it. For me, I have a hard time with this one because, like I said, I get the message and I get like the motives behind it, and I do see the depth of the characters. I think that there was a lot of stuff in the film that just felt useless to me. I thought the second act was definitely the best part of the movie. The third act seemed like it really didn't do anything that you didn't know was going to happen other than kind of deepen your thoughts of Igor. And you get to see the family a little bit, that dynamic. But I'm going to have to give this one, I feel like I give this rating a lot, but
oh boy,
a 2.
Better than I thought you were going to give it.
I do see why people like it. I do see the depth of the message, but it just wasn't something that I really enjoyed watching the whole time.
Yeah. Well, as a man who's never been to a strip club, I feel like I have been. Not sure how I feel about it. 3.5.
Would I visit again? I don't know. Yeah, this was an interesting one. But let us know in the comments what you guys thought. If you think it deserved all the awards that it got. And we'll see you in the next one.
Pop, pop.